your host. As you all know, You and the Law is a 30-minute weekly television program that focuses on the relationship between human beings, Ugandans, yourselves, and the law in Uganda. As you know, the law affects every aspect of our lives, whether it's about food, whether it's about traffic, education, everything that we do rotates around the law. In this edition, we are discussing the impacts of COVID-19 on human rights. And specifically for today, we'll be discussing how COVID-19 has affected the right to food. Do you know your right to food? When was the last time you ate? But what does the right actually mean? To help us unpack this complex area, we have a seasoned lawyer, Mr. David Kabanda from the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. David, you're welcome to You and the Law.
Thank you so much.
How have you been?
I'm fine. How have you been?
Great. You know, COVID-19 has sort of come and disorganized our normal lives. I wonder how, you've been coping up as a professional, as a family man. How has it been?
Well, it is difficult to everyone, as individuals and also families and communities. We find ourselves in those unprecedented times. There is no community cohesion as it used to be. So I personally, I find myself in challenging times, but of course, we soldier on.
Okay. I'm interested, when we're introducing your organization, the name is a bit of a mouthful. Yeah. Maybe could you just help us understand, why you came up with this organization, what do you actually do, and how I can benefit as an ordinary person from the work that you do?
So this is the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights, and it is looking at having a one-stop center for law and adequate living. But you see, adequate living starts with food. This is what many people do not understand.
Yeah.
The moment someone wakes up, the first thing to think about is breakfast, then lunch, then supper, then in the middle you need water, you need a snack, you need fruit. So the entire life of a human being rotates around food. And being lawyers who do social justice, we started this organization to be able to contribute to unpacking, articulation, and also giving legal services to people for the realization of their right to food, but also adequate living. Because you cannot talk about food and you disassociate it from economic rights or trade. So the two work together, and this is why now we have this organization, the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights.
Oh, okay.
CEFROT.
Yeah, I mean, the name is really... yeah.
So the acronym is CEFROT.
CEFROT. Okay, maybe that's fair.
Yeah.
So David, you're talking about adequate living rights. You're talking about the right to food. But what is the idea, behind this right? If we, as a concept, like what does a right to food actually mean? Before we start discussing the legalese and everything.
Thank you for asking that question. You see, the right to food, interestingly, many people do not even think that there is such a right. Many people, when you talk about food, this is one of the things people take so lightly, yet it means everything to them. But the definition is simple. The definition according to international law and the UN is only realized when every man, every woman, or child, as an individual or in community with others, have access to food.
Access.
At all times or means of its procurement.
Access to food.
Access to food.
All times.
All the time.
And means to its procurement.
Or means to its procurement.
Interesting.
And you see, this is where I started from. Every woman, every man, every child, alone or together in a community, have access to adequate food at all times. So you realize that it is already unpacked. We are talking about a man. And there is a reason behind that.
Yes.
A child's nutritional needs are different from the needs of an adult.
Okay.
If a child has been born, we are now speaking with parents. From the day they are born to the 6th month, they must be exclusively breastfed.
Okay.
If you take that breast milk, it is not beneficial to you. So every man, every woman, or child, whether alone or together, and the together component comes in, some people live communally.
Yes.
And we have other also organized institutions like schools or like prisons.
Yes,
If
portion bins.
the moment you take me into prison, then you have an obligation to take care of me.
Yeah.
You cannot just abandon me in prison. You cannot take me to prison and you don't feed me. So whether alone or in community with the others, have access to adequate food at all times. That is also very interesting and important. At all times and all means to its procurement. And that last one is also very important.
Means.
All means
How
to
to
its
get
procurement. Because procurement is a bit bringing in the economic issues.
Yes.
Not everyone has a garden. And you see, it is a choice. Not everyone wants to go to the garden to dig and get food. But you must make sure that your population has means to the procurement of food. Yes.
I mean, interesting.
Yes.
I think for me, access, the means, and then the time, like at all times.
All the time.
Very interesting.
Yes.
So you've sort of unpacked the idea for me in a very, basic and simple way. But then I know that for ideas to work, they need to get some, force of law. So I'm wondering, do we actually have like a legal framework, be it global, be it African or even national level, that guarantees this right? Because some people could say that those are just your ideas, your wishful thinking. Without a law, how do we enforce it? So I'm wondering, is there any legal backing for this right that you're articulating very well?
Actually, what I've just talked about is picked from the law itself.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Now, this is the legal framework. At international level, many people, because now we are talking with everyone, we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yes.
Under Article 25, we are talking about the right to adequate food. You understand? Article 20. This is way back in 1948.
So there's a new word there, adequate.
Adequate.
Not just food, adequate food.
No, and I'm going to be speaking about that. We are talking about adequate food. And I'll be, explaining that. Then, after that, in 1966, we have the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights.
Yes.
Article 11, also articulating that state parties to the convention, to which Uganda is a party because we signed it in 1981, that every state party must respect the right of everyone to adequate food. Then after that we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights.
Now we are getting home.
Yes, we are getting home. Under Article 16, it is also well articulated. Then after that we have the East African Community Treaty.
Hey, our friends Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Congo, Burundi.
It was signed in 1999, and the many other protocols that have come along the way. Under Article 130, 118, 113, 100 itself, they talk about nutrition. In fact, I have taken a lot of time without suing the East African community. I don't know what I'm doing, because in it, every country that state party to the East African community must have, they even give it a very exotic name.
Yes.
Strategic food reserves.
Strategic food reserves.
Yes. I think they were deliberate on picking that word. Strategic food reserves.
For us in Teso, we have granaries. Are you suggesting that the state should have a huge granary where food is reserved? What would that mean actually in practical sense?
Yes, in practical sense, the government must have a system of having its own granaries. Of course, we call it food reserves. There is no country, even if we go to at individual level, I don't know what happens in policy making and what our leaders think. Even in my personal house, the first thing I check out is food. Do we have food for an entire month, a week? You understand? So every country must have those strategic reserves. In case there is drought, in case there is that hunger, then you release some food to your people. You control the price. You understand? But we don't have now here. We used to have but I think they were sold.
Okay. And then at the country level then?
At the country level, okay, you took me to that. Then when we come back home here, we have some laws. Some laws are not very good, and I'm going to tell you why. But let us start with the Constitution.
Yes.
In the directive principles, the objectives, it is clearly spelled out. One, that government must establish, we call them national reserves in our Constitution.
Okay.
National food reserves. Then secondly, it is government's obligation to make sure that every Ugandan eats nutritious food. Yes.
Okay.
And it is government's obligation under the Constitution to create massive awareness about this critical component called the food. Massive awareness.
Yeah.
Then if they are doing that, then they have dispensed their obligation. And beyond that, when you go to chapter 4, we are talking about human rights now.
Yes.
Under Article 20, the government has obligation to respect freedoms and fundamental rights of every Ugandan,
Yes.
Including the right to food.
Yes.
And although it is not, it's specifically mentioned from Article 20 to 45 in chapter 4, but under Article 45, we are talking about other rights that are not specifically mentioned.
Yes.
That is our Constitution. And in the amendment of 2005,
yes,
when they were scrapping all those other things, I don't know who smuggled into Article 8A. Because Article 8A operationalized the objectives.
Yes.
And in fact, the Chief Justice, as he then was, Bat Katrebe, in Nyakana's case, they have come up to articulate that now all these objectives are justiciable. So when we come back home, the legal framework is very expansive and very accommodative, because we even have the Food and Drugs Act.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, you know, quite a revealing, explanation from you, and you've even touched on the aspects of the state obligations, which, raising awareness. I don't know how many people have been aware that actually the government of Uganda has a duty to let you know about nutritious living, about the kind of food that you should eat. But maybe that's an interesting point for us to pause for a quick break, after which we'll resume the conversation with David Kabanda, who is Executive Director of Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights, a non-government organization here in Kampala. Let's go for a break. We'll be right back.
When it comes to the law, we basically live the law, on a day-to-day basis, Whether it is in your bedroom, there is a law that governs it. If you're married, for example, even if you're single, there could be something touching on the law, because you might be in your bedroom with an underage girl, or you might be with another person's wife, all the things are the law,
If you're a human being, you have rights. Those rights are called human rights. They are examples: the right to health, the right to freedom from torture, that underscores human dignity, freedom from slavery. You're not supposed to be someone's slave.
If you look at our penal code, it sets out another marriage laws. It sets out the persons who can marry and those who cannot marry, right? For example, you can't marry your close relatives. If you did, you'd be committing a crime.
The state is not supposed to tell you who to worship, how to worship, how many times a day. No, you have a right to work. A right to work. You have freedom of association.
Cohabitation for whatever period of time does not make you husband and wife, right? And that is why we emphasize to people that when the relationship is still hot, you must ensure that you do what? Marry.
Yes.
For human rights to be respected, protected, and fulfilled, relevant government programs must actually work. Medicine should reach hospitals, oxygen should be there, health workers should have gloves, teachers should be present. Now they are mostly absent, and they have left the profession, a good number of them. They are into trading. So things must work. If things don't work, human rights are not respected, are not protected, and are not fulfilled.
COVID-19 has tested our hope and faith as individuals, families, and the country at large. Besides destroying many aspects of our lives, the novel coronavirus has also affected our human rights in many ways. You and the Law, the COVID edition, is a 30-minute weekly television program that focuses on the impact of COVID-19 on human rights in Uganda. The program engages experts to explain the importance of rights-based approaches to the success of any public health response to ensure the respect, protection, and fulfillment of human rights amidst the challenges presented by COVID-19. You and the Law, the television program, brought to you by Legal Hub Uganda, taking the law to the last mile in proud association with I4C Africa Hub and House of Talent Television, coming soon.
This is You and the Law, the COVID edition here on House of Talent Television, brought to you by Legal Hub Uganda in partnership with I4C Africa Hub. Today we're discussing another human right that has been affected by COVID-19. And I know for many viewers this seems like obvious because we're talking about the right to food. And who else than David Kamala can help us unpack this right, because David has been a social justice lawyer and has been working on the right to food for a long time. He comes from the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. David, welcome from the break.
Thank you.
So before we went for the break, we're trying to demystify this right, what actually it means. You've touched on what the state obligations are in as far as the right is concerned. So let's now switch modes to COVID-19. Like, you know that this edition of You and the Law is focusing on COVID-19 and how it has affected our human rights. And for today, we're specifically focusing on the right to food. So from where you sit, David, how has COVID-19 affected the right to food? Because I know this is your space and perhaps you've been having interventions here and there. But from a broadness, how has this right been specifically affected by COVID-19?
I think where we start from is it has helped, first of all.
COVID has helped?
Yes,
okay.
it has helped this particular kind of theme, the food. And why am I saying this? I want to start with being positive because one of the essential things that the government had to even procure was food. And those, you remember that even the markets were left open and the people were meant to sleep there to sell food.
Yes, please.
And you also remember that government also declared that farmers are essential workers.
Oh yeah,
so
more than lawyers.
More than even us as lawyers. But for me, that one is a positive because it shows how important farmers are, how important food markets are, how important making provision in terms of emergencies is. But we have seen many violations. We have seen many, hunger and death, by the way. It is just because we haven't done an audit. But I know many people have died because of hunger in COVID-19. And why am I telling you this? During COVID-19, the first lockdown, we, as an organization, we did a survey. And we found out that 65% of the people, at least in Wachiso, were in their homes and they did not have any hope of
60%?
65. Yes. And we found many people who are living with illnesses, chronic illnesses, dying not because of the illnesses, but because they don't have access to food. You see, when you're supposed to take medicine, it must be taken with food.
Some even they tell you take with milk.
Or take this medicine after food.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you are locked up. You walking or going to the hospital was first of all limited. It was very difficult. You saw pregnant people being even beaten on the road by security agencies.
Sure.
So many people found themselves entangled. They are at home. They don't have food. They don't have medicine. or they have the medicine, they don't have food. That is number one. The number two, it affected food safety.
Yeah.
How? Many people who had contaminated food put it out cheaply. Many people bought contaminated food, I'm telling you. And it showed out that even the food which government decided to give to people, 38% of that food was contaminated.
The posho...
The portion and beans that people ate.
David, how does food get contaminated?
Well, that is... You see, food... The contamination starts way back in production, in the garden. How? Be very careful when you buy food in Uganda or in the main markets in Kampala. I've started telling people and lawyers specifically, because we need to live longer and serve the community.
Yes.
Grow your own food or pick the food from where you are certain, because Ugandans are using many chemicals and the chemicals are causing cancer. Makerere University has just given out research which indicates that 98% of the food in the 5 markets in Kampala is contaminated. 98. Have you gone to these markets and you find tomatoes having whitish substance?
Yes.
At EU right now, you cannot take any product which has mancozeb. That whitish thing is called mancozeb.
It's a preservative or...
No. It is a pesticide and a fungicide, sorry. So and many people ignorantly use it even in the market. And consumers also want to buy that one with the chemical.
And then you like eating kachumbali, cutting.
And this is what I want to tell to Ugandans. That yes, we are talking about health diets, eat vegetables, eat raw food, but you need to be extremely careful. No Ugandan has the capacity, or they have the capacity, but no Ugandan produces the food that is safe for yourself, for your consumption. The many rejects from the exporters are dumped back to our market. And who regulates? Before you export any product in Uganda, there is what we call phytosanitary. You know, they check whether there are no chemicals and everything. But in Uganda, who checks whether what is put in Nakasero or everywhere?
I thought to have the National Bureau of Standards.
No, who tells you?
We have the Government Analytical Laboratory. What do they do?
They are there, and this is what we are discussing right now. That Ugandans are very comfortable with the leadership that they have. I should say the leader, and I don't mean the political leadership. I mean the technical leadership, because we have district level leadership, which is supposed to check all this. And we are speaking to Ugandans. Some Ugandans are not listening. But where we came from, we were talking about COVID-19 and how it affected the right to food. The right to food safety, after the lifting of the lockdown, there were too many items in the shops, in the supermarkets, which had expired. Those items were never taken out. People bought.
They're disposing them cheaply.
Myself, I bought water. Many Ugandans don't know that water expires.
You mean mineral water?
Mineral water, that water you buy on the shelves in those bottles. You be careful. You read the expiry date. You'll find that you are drinking expired water. Many people just bought and do. There is something that I want to tell to Ugandans.
It might make me stop eating at all.
No. Have you seen many people from Western countries? When we go to these conferences, whether abroad or everywhere, they carry water in their bottles.
Yes.
Why do they do that? Or they have water in the
tap. They get it from.
There is something that I want to communicate to all Ugandans. If we were very concerned, today we would be suing this country. Each family that has lost a person to diabetes should be suing this government for compensation.
David, so let's get back to, you're raising very pertinent issues.
And this is where it is coming from. I know you're talking about COVID-19 and the food. But this is what I want to tell you. When the government decided to give out posho, the kind of posho the government gave out, even when it is not contaminated, it is dangerous to your health. Because they were giving out refined posho. Refined. Government, that was illegal from the word go.
David, we all get maize, take to the machine, the meal for us.
Again, you see,
That's what we eat even at home. So what are you expecting the government to...
for the right to food has 3 obligations, like any other right. We have the obligation to protect, we have the obligation to respect and to fulfill.
Yes.
Let me talk about the obligation to protect. Government must protect us from third parties or protect our right to food. Third parties, I mean, 94% of maize millers in Uganda are not operating food grade materials.
David, every time you drop a statistic, my heart just
This is where we
shrinks.
and
Because
this is why we are doing this work.
Yes.
Now, the milling machines wear out.
yes.
So you are eating metal, in the food. And here is government of Uganda accepting whoever donated kaunga. But what you are giving to your people, we even warned them. Have you heard about food terrorism? What if
Food terrorism?
Yes, someone can wake up and they supply tons of posho, you give it to your people and they die. And many people die.
Yeah.
If I'm talking about 38% of the food being affected or contaminated, it was contaminated with metal, it was contaminated with aflatoxins.
Yes, I think there was a time they rejected our maize in Kenya.
You know?
Yeah.
He was, and so many other things. The beans, you couldn't eat them. So it left many people beyond what government supplied, but these suppliers also. But again, also prices.
Yes.
We even went to court to challenge
Yes,
government.
yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Yes,
that case.
our organization went to court to challenge government on its failure to regulate food, COVID and the food. Because if you decide to give out people food, and this is public expense, it must be with guidelines in the Gazette.
Yes.
But that didn't happen.
But maybe there was no time, David.
No,
We're all in rushing.
But we have regulations about you going to hospital,
spitting.
Yes, spitting. You must report whoever you've seen having. Did you read those regulations?
Yes.
If a minister sat and passed regulations under the Public Health Act, wasn't it proper that government ought to have passed regulations under the Food and Drugs Act?
We will have time to talk about the legality of all these things that. But you've touched on government intervention so far, and I wanted to just ask: is there anything good that came out of the government interventions? Because you seem to paint a very scary picture. What are some of the? What would you think worked in as far as government interventions to protect the right to food during COVID-19?
No.
Anything that government that you think is...
No, I want to tell you that whatever was positive was just circumstantial.
It was a mistake.
Yes. But if we are talking about deliberate intervention,
Yes.
whatever government did was illegal in the first place. Seriously. And I want to speak to the face of government and I tell them, whatever you did during COVID-19, giving people food, was illegal. It killed some people. If you want to do audits, do them. If you don't want to do, of course, Ugandans don't care. They will sleep in their grave and that is it. You cannot wake up and just give me a parcel that there is food there when you don't know actually what is in the parcel. And this is what I'm saying.
So meaning the government's duty to ensure
that food is safe,
of good quality,
yes,
is adequate, nutritious.
They didn't do that.
They didn't do that. David, I mean, it's a heart-wrenching, revelation. But I think let's go for a break at this point, and then when we resume, we'll then try to tackle a bit of the challenges and look forward, cast a picture that if we got into the situation in future, what are the lessons we learned? What do we need to do best? We'll have that after the break. Viewers, you're watching You and the Law, the COVID edition, and today we are hanging out with Mr. David Kabanda, the Executive Director of the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights, a non-government organization that focuses on ensuring the right to food in this country. This is You and the Law, the COVID edition, proudly brought to you by Legal Hub Uganda in partnership with I4C Africa Hub. Let's go for a short break. We'll be back. Welcome back. This is You and the Law, the COVID edition here on House of Talent Television. My name is Jonathan Ochom, and today we're having Mr. David Kabanda, the Executive Director for Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights, to expound for us the right to food, which I think is ably done from the start. Explain how it has been affected by COVID-19, what the state has done, what has worked, perhaps what are the challenges that we encountered. And now we're trying to look to the future, David. And welcome back, really, from the break.
Thank you, sir.
I know we started from the first segment, we slightly hinted on some of these challenges that we encountered in this process. I don't know if there are any other successes or failures that you can give in the context of protecting the right to food during the pandemic.
Well, I think the government ought to have also understood, because when we are talking about right to food, there are three critical elements that we must put on table. I already talked about availability of food, that the food must be available. Then the food must be adequate. Adequate in terms not only that it is enough to fill the stomach, but nutritious. But it must also be accessible.
Yes.
Now, during COVID-19, we had very disturbing facts. We had food rotting in people's gardens.
Yeah.
You could even find on the road when people have even powered cabbage. You understand? We have places like Isingiro where we had matoke, a batch was going to
1,000.
1,000.
Yes.
You understand? So what government ought to do, and a system that government must put in place, they should now own up the system.
The food system?
The food system. We have private and government hospitals.
Yes.
We have private and government schools. Did you get what I'm talking about?
Yes.
What is failing us here now on the right to food is we do not have a government arm when it comes to food. Because do you know what ought to have happened is, if you know that food in this particular place, we are in a pandemic, but it is plenty here and here people are dying, then you must facilitate its transit to places where there is scarcity.
Yes.
Right now, we have Kalamajongs who are dying because of hunger.
Yeah.
I have seen World Food Program, crying out loud. But we have food here. We have food in some spaces. So we think that if government puts, its mind to these three elements, availability, accessibility, and adequacy, we'll go there. And I want also to mention something on adequacy.
Yes.
I made a statement that each family that has lost a person to type 2 diabetes, they need to sue this government for compensation. And do you know why? Many people in Uganda don't know what and how to eat.
What and how to eat.
Yes, including us who think that we have gone to school.
Yeah, for us, I come from Teso, we get our cassava flour.
You leave the Teso.
Mix it and
No. You leave the Teso thing.
I don't know what you want us to do again.
When you leave Teso, you come to Kampala.
Yes.
And when you come to Kampala, you get accustomed into the lifestyle that happens in these streets.
But here it is matoke, David. I don't know what you're talking about now.
Are you sure it is matoke? No, it is the chapati.
Oh.
It is the Rolex. Didn't we have a minister for tourism who was promoting Rolex? But I want government to come here and challenge me on where do we grow wheat in Uganda?
Yes.
This is all imported.
Wheat.
Did you hear about people who were given food in Pade and Amdat and died? They ate food and died. They ate food which was imported. And we are questioning, we are asking government, where did this food pass from? People are just consuming chapati, but chapati is going to eat into our communities. Chapati is going to kill people. And you know why? It is delicious, people want it.
Yes.
But I'm telling you, this refined flour is going to kill all our people.
You know, David, I studied in Busoga region, so
Yes.
now I'm concerned when you say Rolex is problematic. We might be dealing with, it will be a genocide of sorts, because then it's a popular snack in Jinja,
if someone,
Iganga,
if someone cares to do an audit on how chapati and rice is
Even rice, David.
yes. Yes. Do you
So
know
the growing kibimba as you're going to Tororo.
First, listen to me. The communities or rice eating populations don't eat rice the way we eat it. I've been in India. The way they eat chapati is not how we eat chapati. The way they eat rice is not the way we eat rice. People eat vegetable rice. Here, you just put in the saucepan, you get a mass of white stuff, and you put it in your stomach, and then you sleep with it. It is going to kill you. Let me tell you, seriously speaking, many Ugandans are going to die before 60 years. Do you know that 85% of Ugandans are dying between 45 to 60?
You know, every time you drop a statistic, David, yeah, my heart
And this
disappears.
is it. For me, I'm telling people, but people don't want to listen. And this is where government must come in to regulate.
Yeah, regulation.
Regulation, but also create massive. In countries like Finland, they designed a program for 5 years to do serious food literacy. If you went to Finland today, no restaurant will serve you supper past 7 p.m. No restaurant. Here in Uganda, you can eat
Midnight.
until 2 p.m. You go back home and sleep. You see?
And wake up to have breakfast at 8.
Yes. So what we are talking about, that COVID-19 found us with our problems.
Yes.
It has it has increased them because we are now talking about low COVID-19 and food. Many people couldn't even get inputs to grow food because you see the entire ecosystem rotates around my mother. I work in Kampala. I work, get money, buy inputs and send to my mother.
Yes.
That didn't happen during COVID-19.
There's no movement.
There's no movement. Shops are locked down, and the entire chain was, disturbed. But of course, we are now talking about a new season. People are planting. Perhaps we'll have enough food. But when they grow the food, is the food safe? Is the food transported? Many people here are eating beef from these cows from Western Uganda, from Chiboga, from everywhere. But do you know how those cows are transported? Have you ever found a cow shivering?
Yes.
Do you know what that means to that meat? The
No.
moment that meat is slaughtered, it is already toxic.
The shaking of the cow makes...
Do you know how they tie their tails?
Ah.
And up, you see that pain on a truck for 200 kilometers, and then you bring it to the, and you
This
slaughter,
place
and then you... Have you heard about formalin in meat in Kampala?
Yes.
Do you know where that story ended and why nobody is talking about it?
No.
Who told you that formalin stopped? Have you heard about people who pump chemicals into chicken?
I mean, there was a time we were happy if you're eating and you see flies. Actually, when you're buying meat, one of the tests was that you should see flies in the bush. Otherwise, if it doesn't have, then there's a problem.
Then we have a problem. Then we have fish. Everyone now has a fish pond. Not everyone, many people have fish ponds. Who regulates the fish
How do they feed?
You understand?
What do they feed on?
What do they feed on? If you, my brother Jonathan, if you still eat chicken in any of the restaurants in Kampala, you're doomed. I don't. Do you know why? I have ever been involved in the chicken business. And one time I found out that the practice is when they fall sick, sometimes it is tragic. They can even die in one day.
Yes.
They pump with, antibiotics and everything, and they bring it to the market.
It's like I want the heavy thigh.
So who regulates it? The issue is not because every farmer here is a veterinary officer
In this country.
So who regulates the poultry business?
Yeah.
Have you seen chicks coming from Nairobi, coming in on trucks? Who regulates that?
Yeah. So, David, you mentioned, you were talking about regulation, and it's really a core, state obligation. At the certain point, you talked about inputs, about seeds that we actually plant. And I wanted to sort of try to see how can we link that to actually food safety, ensuring that we eat right food. Because I think there have been a lot of conversations around GMOs, around what. Yeah, I wonder what your mind is in this area, because, I mean, you are talking about COVID, but all these are interlinked. Ultimately, if I plant something which is bad down, you don't expect it to give you anything better anyway. Yeah.
I want to be on this camera, and I thank President Museveni. He has rejected the GMO bill twice. And President Museveni, I want to thank you so much for that. And I want to appeal to members of parliament. Now that the president rejected that GMO bill, please don't pass it into law. What we need to work on is to advance community seed banks.
Community seed banks.
People don't have seeds. Companies have come here, they've introduced hybrids and other varieties.
Yes.
And our indigenous seeds are being eroded away.
It's a curious case, because, again, where I come from, we used to have one groundnut. It was called etesot. Like, etesot would mean like from teso. And then suddenly these days we're talking about Serenat 1, Serenat 2, Serenat 3. Like all the local names, all the things that we used to have local names for, you can't find them. I can't ask you, where have they gone?
So I think now that takes us into another discussion of food sovereignty. Because it borders on food security and everything. But the only thing that I want to thank President Museveni for, he has been for our indigenous knowledge, our indigenous food. But what defeats is policy implementation and plans. Because, President, if you want us to have safe food, then you must also implement the extension workers' policies and agroecological practices in our communities, because people no longer have the seed to plant.
True.
And when we get the seed to plant, we are getting these hybrids, and we do not know how
that are created in laboratory.
Yes, and how. And by the way, people must be very careful. This food is affecting our genetic makeup. Seriously speaking, and this is why it must be regulated to the core. It must be regulated. Listen. We are going into a generational crisis. And you know why? Science has indicated that we have what we call the 1,000 critical days of a human being. And where am I reading
That's about
this?
3 years.
No. From the day you are conceived to your second birthday. That's the first phase. And where am I reading this? I'm reading it from NDP 3, National Development Plan 3.
Yes.
You understand? Talking about human capital development. The moment someone conceives, or before they conceive, they must prepare the body using nutrition.
Yeah.
You understand?
Not swallowing some...
You understand?
Pills
Then immediately after conceiving the baby, you must change diet.
Yes.
You understand? And after that, throughout pregnancy and giving birth, I have already talked about exclusive breastfeeding. But what do children eat after? We did a study, and people are picking sodas and everything to give to
Their
children.
Poison.
Poison. Dangerous.
David, man. Let's move now, looking at the future. Worst case scenario, in another 5 years, we get another pandemic. I mean, I hope it doesn't happen. What are those lessons that we pick from COVID-19 that can enable us safeguard the right to food? What those recommendations that you would give, so that, because when the thing started, we thought it is fine in China. So, and I thought we had enough time to prepare. But now, just caught us off guard. So in, say, 10 years, if this ever happened again, what would be those things that you say, for us to manage, if something of a similar magnitude came, this is how we would protect the right to food?
Of course, the right to food creates obligations and responsibilities.
Yes.
I have talked too much about obligations, but there are also obligations on people. The people, if government tells you it like this, you realize that the pandemic has killed many people who had underlying illnesses.
Yes.
If you had diabetes, it was very difficult for you to survive. So the first thing is, eat properly. The government sometimes has created awareness, NGOs like us are doing it. Make sure that your immune system is strong.
Yes.
You understand? That's where we start from. In preparation for any pandemic going forward, let us eat fresh food. Let us eat safe food.
You have enough ammunition.
To fight back.
Yes.
That is number one. Then number two is on the obligation side, government.
Yes.
Where do we start from? We must make sure as government that we have food reserves. We do not have a middle, we can't take sides. It must be a well-planned system of making sure that we have a fallback position.
Yes.
Because the government was caught off guard. They didn't know where to get food from. They called the suppliers, donors, and it couldn't help.
Even MPs were looking for food to buy for their constituents.
So why would we be going into that mess? We ought to have our system. That is number one. Then number two, I know that Uganda is a liberal economy. But when it comes to food, government must have some level of control. It may not be upper hand, but it must have a level of control in terms of prices. Do you know I have colleagues who are lawyers who called me, Kabanda, what are you doing? The prices of food, the price. And people were crying about the price. Do you know that we ran out of salt during that time? It was Kenya that saved us.
Even lemon.
Lemon. People even started selling wild fruits as lemon. You understand? So government must retain some control over prices and over food. So I think the point I want to make here, COVID has taught us that the capitalistic approach to food does not work. We need to respect smallholder farmers. Government must regain some level of control, and we must have food reserves. But lastly, let us embrace environmental justice, agroecology, and make sure that people grow food within their own communities, and by within their own communities to cut down on the food miles. That you call me here one time, I'll be talking about the law and food miles.
I mean, yeah, definitely.
Viewers,
this has been a bit of an overdose, really. And really have to thank David Kabanda. I think David makes very, very valid points, and they are very simple. One, look after yourself. Ensure that your immunity is boosted. You're eating the right food, you're exercising, so that in case a pandemic came again, personally you're in position to defend yourself. But to our government, he's made a very strong case for regulation. Food is a sensitive matter. It's what enters into our bodies. So if we let people who are after money to control what enters our bodies, that could be a problem. That could be a problem for you. That could be a problem for our families, a problem for this country. With that, viewers, we come to the end of today's edition of You and the Law, the COVID edition. I've been your host, Jonathan Ochom, and we've been having Mr. David Kabanda from the Center for Food and Adequate Living Rights. Thank you so much. Next week, we'll be looking at another topical right that has been hit by the virus. Tune into House of Talent Television, and you'll get to know what that is. Bye for now.
I come from the Pearl of Africa. It's a beautiful country with beautiful nature. To me, it really inspires me and motivates me. And actually, in one of my tags on my clothing, especially on my jeans, you see those lines that appear on the back pockets of the jeans. When I was doing my internship in Paris, I happened to go to a fashion museum where I read a few books, you know, about fashion designers and their names and about their creations and things like that. There are signs on jeans like the Wrangler, the Lee jeans. All those jeans have signs on the pockets. And before I went to Paris, I was doing that already because I was drawing my inspiration. I used to love geography. And the Ugandan, East African geography was really very interesting to me. You know, knowing that I come from the Great Lakes, East African Rift Valley, that's why you see those lines on my jeans. I brought two theories because they are just theories about the creation of the Great East African Rift Valley. So I put those. So it's the nature and the music that really inspires me and motivates me.
Wow. It is a creative industry talk. My name is Eddie Okila, and of course, my guest this morning has been around the world. A man who has worked in the investment banking sector. He's an engineer by profession. He is a ballroom dancer, the British 2015 champion of the ballroom dance. And of course, he's a creative thinker. He's a man who is trying to turn life of the farmers in northern Uganda around and trying to give them meaning creatively using energy, electricity created from food waste to useful stuff. Ladies and gentlemen all across the world, the one and only engineer, Peter Odokonyero. In fact, his name is Peter Benhor Odokonyero Nyeko. Peter, welcome to the show. I had to get this right today.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome to the program. And of course, I like the new look of you. Today, we're not seeing you on the suit and Mr. Uganda, the tie. I think some people are going to be heavily confused of how creative you have become to come onto the creative industry talk. How are you today?
Awesome, awesome. Bonjour à tous. Sabah al-khair. Buenos dias, bon dia to everyone.
Wow.
That's Shanghai.
All right. So yes. Peter has just returned from France and is fresh from Montefiore with French President Emmanuel Macron and of course many people there from Africa, from the new Africa-French relationships and the conference that happened in France just a week ago. And today on the program, we're focusing on that discussion. If you will put the topic up there for everyone to see all across the world. This is the House of Talent Television. We're talking about the New Africa-France Summit 2021. What does it really mean for Uganda creative industry? And that will be the very first start of this interview, Pete.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It's great to be here again.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
Yes. And we were great and grateful, with my colleagues to spend a few days in France, in Paris and Montpellier. Montpellier is on the south of France. It's basically on the Mediterranean Sea. Lovely weather. It felt like being in Kampala, actually, with at least 21 others who went with us from Uganda, from different industries, including the creative industry space.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So we want to just dive into that conversation, Peter, today, just to sort of understand, what does this new Africa, France relationship means to the African creative industry? And to start from the Africa perspective, then we'll narrow it down to East Africa and we'll bring it down to Uganda. What does this really mean to us? What is France saying to us?
Ultimately, creativity comes down to the building blocks of life.
Yeah.
Comes down to understanding.
Yeah.
Comes down to communication, to conversation, and to understanding each other. Understanding each other's customs, each other's cultures, each other's best points, each other's needs for encouragement or otherwise, and each other's inspirations. So one way of looking at it is saying, great, I mean, how do we communicate? You know, what language do we use? Do we speak to each other in French, in France? Do we speak to each other in an African language in Africa? Do our French colleagues learn our languages? Do we learn their languages? Do we learn how to eat their food? Do they learn how to eat our food? Do we learn how to make it? Do we find interesting ways to find similarities between us? What do our grandmothers teach us? Could it be the same thing? What do our grandfathers teach us? Could it be the same thing as well? Yeah. And finding within that, within our cultures and traditions, a lot of similarities that we can build on. And that's one way of looking at it, kicking off. But then also, when we think of it from the other side, we also have similar challenges. You know, we're all on Mother Earth. So the environment is important to all of us. The future is important to all of us. The climate is important to all of us. And, you know, little children who are being born and growing, we all want to make sure they live in a better world than we're in now. And so these are some of the few similarities we have in common, and I'm sure there's so many more. So what creativity is so important, and the industry of creativity is so important, is because it allows us to explore our similarities in many ways and accentuate them and build our relationships around those.
Wow. This is the Creative Industry Talk. My name is Edio Kela. Mr. Peter Nyeko is in the studio, is fresh from France, and we're talking about the New Africa France Summit 2021 and what it means for the creative industry in Africa. And Peter has just given us a whole different, perspective to this. New Africa, what does this really mean to Ugandan creatives, if you will break it down? We want to just, first before the Ugandan, but today, East Africa.
Indeed.
East Africa has a few spots that has a relationship with France. We are not necessarily a very deep French-speaking countries, but we are part of the African continent, which France is saying this is we need to have a new African relationship with us. What does this really mean to the Anglo-speaking countries in East Africa when France brings and starts this kind of conversation?
Awesome. What's interesting is, even if you go to England, if you go to the United Kingdom, and you look at the coat of arms of the royal family, there is there written, Dieu est mon droit. It's written in French.
Okay. Dieu est mon droit.
Dieu est mon droit.
Dieu est mon droit.
Yeah. So it's like, God and my right. Yes. And so already, even as we speak English, there is so much of France in the English that we do speak. Okay. We tell each other bon appetit when we're eating. Yes. And many other things. We say au revoir when we want to see each other again. Yes. But it's more than just that. In the end, Africa is a wonderful continent which has had interesting histories. The histories may have been joyful. They could be more joyful in other areas. But what's interesting is whether we look at history from one side of Africa or another side of Africa, there's a lot we can learn from history. And there's a lot we can work with what we know from history to make the future even brighter. And that's what I see from this. There is so much that we here in Uganda, for example, have learned from our brothers and sisters in the more French-speaking parts of Africa, especially when it comes down to culture, fashion, music, and so on. I mean, over the years, as Uganda's own music industry was being built, I'm pretty sure there was a lot of music coming in from the Congo and other places, Pepe Kale, all these guys, before we had our own people on this side coming up with the music. So with music already, we've seen that conversation. with fashion, we still see that conversation all across. My shirt's made in Kampala, but the tailor was born in Congo.
Yes.
So, I mean, that conversation is already happening as we speak. We just want to take that conversation deeper.
Okay.
And let it flow both ways.
Yeah.
There's also a lot from the East African way of doing things that can be shared on the other side as well.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurial way of life and a few other things as well.
Yeah.
So that conversation is something which, starts off in Africa, hence, new in Africa, but it also flows in to France and other places.
Yeah.
Because France has a lot of Africa in it as well.
Yeah.
Not just in the last 100 years, but if you go historically way back, think of the Africans, who were part of the Roman ecosystem as France became part of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Think about the relationship going back, way back to those days, thousands of years ago. So it's not just 100 years.
This relationship has been there before.
It has been there. It's been there before, yes.
Now, Peter, we just want to encourage everyone to, go onto our YouTube, subscribe, like, share FanWide. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Twitter for those who are on the move. Twitter is live for you right there, and of course on our website. So any of those platforms that you're watching the program from, please go and share it far and wide. We're going to have a great conversation with Peter, and we're just trying to sort of like lay ground to, what does this, New Africa, France 2021 summit means to us going forward. Peter, you've broken this from the Africa perspective. We want you to just, and you've talked about it from the East African perspective. Let's bring it home.
All right.
Home is Uganda. And Uganda has been the home and the host to Alliance Francaise and the French embassy for many years. And the relationship has been working on. Back in the days, we used to have a lot of the French, Alliance Francaise and UGCS, which is the Gautier Foundation. And all of this about promoting creativity, culture, and beginning to foster relationship for, cross-cultural learning, for peace building. What does this mean when the French people and the president begin to say New Africa? What does it mean for Uganda and the creative industry?
Awesome. So new is an interesting word, you know. New is rebirth.
Yeah.
You could think about it that way.
Yeah.
Rejuvenation,
Yeah.
And new could be starting with where you are and discovering more within that and expanding upon it.
Yeah.
And so we're saying it's amazing, Many of us who are above a certain age will remember a day when there were lots of cars on Uganda's roads that were made in France. Do you remember what those cars were called?
Yes, Renault
And
the Peugeot.
And that one in French, what do they call it?
Peugeot.
Yes.
The 504,
yes.
the 204.
Indeed. So
Yes.
there's enough of that in there already.
Yeah.
But when we come to today,
Yeah.
go to all the restaurants around Kampala, coffee shops, you'll find croissants all around Kampala. So I mean, it's already changing as we see.
Yeah.
And we love that. But we're saying, what more is there? If we think about it from a different angle, we talked about creative industry.
Yes.
And creative industry, creativity and industry
Yes.
goes beyond fashion, goes beyond music, goes beyond dance, goes to the building blocks of industry itself.
Yeah.
Because industry itself is creativity made real.
Yeah.
And if we think about the creative industries
Yeah.
of France, or the industries which are of a French origin, that have brought their creativity to Uganda. I mean, we know very well that very many Ugandan young people went to study about, engineering of a certain type, and there's a huge investment from a number of large French companies in Uganda, linked a lot to, other industries, whether you're thinking it from the point of view of energy, or you're thinking it from the point of view of water, or from the point of view of logistics, or from the point of view of infrastructure and roads.
Yes.
When you think about it from that angle as well now, you go, how big is France's investment conversation with Uganda?
Okay, that's a very interesting conversation to have.
And when we think about it from that point of view,
Yeah.
is it a fleeting investment or is it an investment for the ages? If it is an investment for the ages, if that investment will be there for generations,
Yeah.
our conversations should also be built on building blocks that can go on for generations.
Yeah.
Therefore, the communication has to be renewed
Yes.
in many ways.
Yes.
We have to find new and more interesting ways
Yeah.
to understand each other even more.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe I speak to someone in French, in France, in French, and they speak back to me in Luo.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll try something like that.
Yes.
Who knows? Maybe I'll go to France and have Luombo
Yeah.
in Paris, and they'll come to Kampala and have croissants in Kampala.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we already have, Ugandan fashion designers based in France,
yes.
don't we? There's a
Yes,
lovely
we know.
lady
We
there.
have Stella Tal based in France. We have another lady based in France, and Stella actually has been teaching in a French school
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome, indeed.
for these years, and she's been teaching people our culture in a preschool.
Yes.
and of course teaching also people in community.
Indeed, indeed.
Yes, and we've hosted her on creative industry quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then down the road here,
Yeah.
we've got the Alliance Française,
Yes.
around the corner, we've
Yes.
got the École Française, but
Yes.
many Ugandan schools are teaching French,
Yes.
Yes. And Ugandan universities as well are teaching French.
Yes.
And a lot of our professional public sector servants
Yeah.
in different sectors
Yeah.
of government
Yeah.
are quite fluent in French. I've had conversations with people in agriculture who speak
Yes.
French as well as you could possibly imagine,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So the building blocks are there.
Yeah.
But now we need to say, great, Uganda is a very young country.
Yeah.
We've got great building blocks.
Yeah.
How can we build on from these building blocks and involve these young people who are the future of this country in this conversation?
Wow.
And that's where it becomes really interesting.
Wow.
And that's what takes us to the speech which was made by His Excellency the President of France in Ouagadougou in 2017,
Yeah.
which went on to what happened a couple of weeks ago in France, with people coming together, conversations being frank, honest, respectful, hopeful, and positive. And that's really exciting from that angle.
Yeah.
If you go and follow on Twitter or on the internet, and just Google, in English, because all those websites now are in English as well, even though they're obviously in French as well. But you Google New Africa France Summit. Okay, when you Google that, you'll find so many interesting websites linked to that, and it takes you to a lot of the interesting initiatives that were birthed out of the redefining of the conversation that started in Ouagadougou a few years ago, and that have been augmented by the deeper conversations had the other week, where we had a number of Ugandans actually on stage, both ladies and gentlemen, but others from across the continent. And now, for those in the traditional creative industries, as well as any other industries which are creative, because they all are, there are so many things that you can find there which can help you be part of improving this conversation while moving forward with your hopes and dreams as colleagues building the hopeful future for this continent.
Wow. Wow. Peter, I want you to hold it right there. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, Peter and I will dive deeper and dig deeper into what this necessarily means. And furthermore, we want to understand this new, Africa-France summit and the relationship that is being built. Where does it lead us? How do we benefit from there? Peter scratched the surface, but we're coming back after this break and, digging deep into what does it mean for a traditional creative person here, from agricultural point of view as a creative, to, textile point of view as a creative, to a policy point of view as a person who makes policy for creative thinking or for creative spaces, as well as, from the political angle, what does it really mean if we're thinking creatively? Stay right there. We'll be right back after this break. This is the Creative Industry Talk. What happens typically if a business person comes to you and they don't have a story completely? Do you have to go and start creating this story with them? Do you guide them as a creative consultant? What do you do in that process when the customer is absolutely green about what they are talking about, but you need to create a product for them? What do you do always?
In my approach,
Yeah.
I usually have standard questions.
Yeah.
More like my frequently asked questions around
Yeah.
product development. That includes even from brand development when creating logos. So I have, if they don't have, everybody has a story.
Yeah.
It's just that some people don't know how to capture their story.
Yeah.
So at that moment, I'm like a brand journalist trying to dig and harvest that story out of that person if they don't know they have it. So I will ask them this set of questions. By the time we are done, they will realize, oh, I actually have a story. I just didn't think of it from that perspective. Just like now, I asked you, where do you come from? And if I dig into your Lyra origins, before
which is now Yam,
before you know it, which school did you go to? I mean, how did you grow up? Before you know it, then we will end up to your idea, how you got the idea. There's a whole bunch of questions that can dig us close to creating the story. So it's not very hard. It's not as hard. For me, I usually have a default set of questions ready, and every person answers these questions differently, and that gives them their story.
Can we hear some more from Jaja? Of course, Jaja is going to play for us that song, Kitenge. You've heard it, the sound, beautiful, and we're going to dive into how Kitenge is going to make it to the world stage as planned by Latif Shah.
Abamina bakyala mwena naddala bali erudda eri mu North London kyembakutira kiri kimu butekubagiza wadde embeera za korona bangi zatutagula kakati tuve mu mayumba kitengi bateyi n'ensonze bumale ate nga tetusaanidde ddala kugisuwa mwani yabagamba okwambala engoye z'emivumba tujja kwambala bitengi byokka Designer Latifu Uganda omurasita owakabye yatunga mu nnyonyi Maliki Jeni ne Hawa abo basibi banviiri alo tujja kuba nabo Anifa wa makeup Mariamu yedikoleetako ne Popini ebyokulya bingi nnyo ebyekifiiriko Madamu Sara Shoshi ebitaddemu omukono Olivia Katharine Nalima Maka manyinga owulira Kolono otwambala ebitengi byokka Kolono otwambala bitengi byokka
Welcome back. This is the Creative Industry Talk. My name is Eddie Okela, and in the studio is engineer Peter Ben-Hur Odokonyero Nyeko. He is also the proprietor of, rather the CEO of Manduli's Energy, and of course Ripal and Chakula. These are all brands under him, and the creative space is what Peter does. Peter is a dancer and is an Arabic teacher. He speaks French and he speaks Luo. He speaks English fluently and he speaks Spanish. Now, these are all facets of creativity in one man. Who is better fit to be on this show? And he was one of the people who were in France speaking in French with the French president representing Uganda. And of course, on that summit that we had in France a few just days back or weeks back. Peter, welcome back to the program. We want to go back from the point where we are talking about, we're discussing the New Africa France Summit 2021. Yes. Now, the opening of the conference, let's start from there. What does it really mean for creativity in Uganda? We saw the French president and the French people open that summit with a dance from the African lady and one seemingly looking like Italian. And then the African dance was on stage and everything was about that. And in that moment, what was it trying to communicate to Africa and to, the creative industry?
Thank you so much. I mean, being African and being in that room, you could say it was interesting, it was vibrant and it was welcoming. And anyone who had come in and may have felt a bit cold, warmed up. The ice was broken. It was possible to now be open, fully open, and feel when you open an event with the kind of music that makes you move, get off your feet, and sweat a little bit. The conversation thereafter is fully open. Yeah. Nothing's held back. So that was very interesting from that point of view. But also the fact that those who may have been in France for the first time suddenly thought, wait, I'm from Chad, I'm in France, there's a Chadian musician on stage. Or I'm from Bujumbura, I'm in France, there's a Bujumburan dancer on stage. And thinking, wow, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel welcomed, I feel at home. Yeah. That's the message which everyone could basically feel. But at the same time, the fact that you had people from France who are not from an African origin joining in and having even more fun than we're used to having to that same music meant we're all one family. And that was wonderful. And it made a difference because it was a very young audience, an audience where I may have been one of the few people who were not as young. That made a difference there as well. But when we got to the point where the head of state welcomed everyone and had a stage with very young people on it and very open conversations in French and in English on that stage, which you can all see online. You can go to the website, of New Africa France Summit. You can go to the website of the Elysee Palace, or the entire 3.5 hour, big event at the end of the summit is all there online. But you can see everything else as well as the other conversations. But early in the morning, because this happened in the evening to close it, but in the morning and in the early afternoon, you had different sections of the summit where you had the business people having their mini summits, and a Ugandan spoke there. You had the creative industries having their conversations, and a Ugandan spoke there as well. You had the environmental side of things, and you had the sports side of things. So now you see business, environment, sports, creativity. That's what makes it so interesting. Everything that we are really vibrant with as a continent and as a world going forward.
Wow. Yes. Peter, so that moment communicated connectivity according to you. That moment communicated that we are welcome. That moment communicated that the things are starting from a new, perspective. I mean, it was a moment for reflection for very many people, including myself, when I was looking into that. Earlier on, we had had a series of events all across, I think, Uganda, when they were preparing toward this day. And one of the things that struck me most was a film that was screened, you know, in preparation leading to the conference. It was about Don't Film. The film was titled Don't Film Me. And when we watched this film, there was this scene in the film where, you know, the director and the producer comes and he pulls out the, you know, the sweets and the chocolate and give it to the children, and the children speak, and then somebody comes and says, why do you give them the chocolate? Did they ask you if they, did you ask them if they want the chocolate? What if they want cassava? What if they want this? What if they want this? And that moment simply just came out alive. And we were having a conversation in that moment and saying, look, when we hear now the new Africa-France relationship, and looking at the past where, you know, the Western world would always just come and give. They assume that this is what you need and then just give you. From the creative point of view, they would come here to come and write the story and tell the story of an African man or woman without talking and getting their perspective. The French president and the French people seems to be saying, no, we now want this story to be told by you. And that's what I saw on the stage. And that's what I saw, the choreography and, you know, the dance, the culture that was being fused on there was telling a lot of things in the background. Where does this leave us with our, you know, the previous mindsets of this is how it is to the new mindset that is trying to be shaped at the moment by the French people?
What's most interesting is on that journey that we went to and in the conversations that we had, the first thing is New Africa.
Yeah.
We felt the New Africa so much because we got to meet other Africans who we may have not met otherwise.
Yeah.
Africa is not as connected and interconnected as it could be.
Yeah.
So to have an opportunity to meet other entrepreneurs, other creatives, other young people from other African countries, where you spend a week together and interact and share and learn and build on for a better future was even bigger than any conversations that were had with France.
Yeah.
What was great there was you'll find a difference, you'll find a change from the relationships that were built amongst the Africans who had actually gone.
Yeah.
That's kind of one way of looking at it. Secondly, obviously, as you did say, you know, at the event, it was no holds barred. There was every bit of honesty. There was a lot of truth. There was a lot of understanding and coming to terms with the more difficult parts of the history of this relationship.
Yeah.
And it was crucial in that it is now called the New Africa-France Summit. And it follows the alphabetical order. Though previously, many years ago, it was the other way around.
It was France-Africa relationship.
Indeed.
Yes.
So you could say the focus is more on following the alphabetical order now.
Yes. I see where you're coming. I see the point.
Yes.
Peter, that said, does that now mean that from a creative point of view, down here in Uganda,
yes,
we can now begin to think about what are our creative, works here, businesses that we also start here? Can it begin to go and open up stores in France? Can Ugandan, creative people also, Africa creative people also go and invest in France? Because there's been the trade balance between, France and Africa, to be specific, and in Uganda, is more of the France investing in Uganda and less of Uganda investing in France. Now, I want to look at from that point of view. If we're thinking now creatively, and there are products, of course, we now have people like Stella Attal in France. Does that mean Attal can come up with a factory or set up a factory in France, does that mean that Pfizer Chiwewa, that was part of the delegation, can set up a festival of a Baimba festival in France and run it in France without any limitation? Does that mean like Dawoodi, Karunji and the many likes and yourself, can you go and start a farm in France and also build your product there and run your product? Did you see that sense and that kind of sense in the conversation? I know some conversation on stage was quite tensed.
Yes.
I saw some people from the western part who were quite very tough at the moment and the French president remained calm and everything was like, okay, we take this from you and we continue to build this relationship. So that moment that was very tense of some great exchange of ideas on stage were quite very telling, and it came out as a way of some people feeling still hungry about some of the things that happened in the past. Others saying, no, this is it. This is the moment. This is the new Africa France. We are moving forward. What did you feel while sitting there? As an investor, that's number one. As a creative mind in France, as a man who actually acts in the theater, what opportunities did you see that the creative art can actually, present itself and do in France?
Interesting. The conversation is getting quite wide now.
Yes.
But I'll go back to what you started with.
Yes.
One thing we all know about France is, France is happy, joyful, and proud to be France. That's the first thing we can learn from France.
Yeah.
France knows all about France. France celebrates France. France celebrates its history, its cuisine, its language, its music, its culture.
Mm-hmm.
So when we want to have a conversation with France, it helps if we also come from a point of celebrating our history, our culture, our heritage, our food. Then we can have it, because the conversation involves exchange.
Yes.
So we have to have
ideas.
something to bring forward. And if we don't yet understand ourselves fully, if we don't yet celebrate ourselves fully, it's difficult to begin to share what we ourselves don't yet understand. It takes us back to earlier conversations we had about what is Uganda, what is being Ugandan.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, first of all. France is very sure what France is. I can be comfortable about that.
Yeah.
You will never find anywhere in the world a Bordeaux wine done the way it's done in Bordeaux.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yes, that's true.
You will never find Camembert cheese done the way they do Camembert in France. Have we got to a point where we can say, do we have a bukoto pie, which is the only way to cook that pie in the whole world?
Yeah.
So when we go to Montpellier, we can get something from there and share with them that. So that's one way of looking at it. We've got to focus a bit more and really learn to celebrate ourselves. Can we have our equivalent of what is celebrated at the Louvre in Paris? Can really celebrate that heritage to that much? That's important from that traditional creative side of things. But when we go to the other side as well, I mean, of course, I am very confident that Ugandan businesses in any sector who are able to dream, plan, and realize can fly to France and invest in any part of France as well. I mean, of course, you've already mentioned a few businesses in the creative industry already who already invested in France.
Yeah.
But in other industries as well, that can happen. In the knowledge industry, in many others.
Yeah.
What makes it even more interesting now is investment is not only physical. It's not only in hardware.
Yeah.
Now you've got the internet. You've got developers in Uganda, developers elsewhere who can develop Ugandan apps that could be used in France. But now it shouldn't be only about we create something, we put it on a ship, and we ship it out, and we get paid for it. That's when we go new. We've got to think beyond that now and go, okay, let's not say, all right, great, let's have something for them to buy.
Yeah.
No, let it be a conversation as well from that point of view.
Yeah.
And let's say, is there something we can take from our learnings of how we have overcome some of our challenges in Uganda? Is there something we can take from that to invest in a part of France that may be facing similar challenges, that could learn from how we solve these challenges? I'm sure with a bit of research we can find a few areas where we can share. The same way France has been able to share with us so much on the technological side, in oil and gas, you know, in infrastructure, in water services, and so much more.
And that said, Peter, I just want to take you deeply on that part of the conversation. So, was that the sense that you picked from there while you attended the New Africa-France Summit 2021, when the French president was talking, when all the presenters were on stage and talking? Did you see that as a person from Uganda, from the creative, that you think this is the creative side that we need? Did you see the sense of what you're talking about?
What's exciting is I saw it, I felt it, and you know, I could see others also acting on it. What's interesting from that point of view was those of us involved in business went a few days earlier. We were there on Monday. We had events on Monday and Tuesday within the premises of the French government. We had another summit on the Wednesday and the Thursday. So we had a lot of time to interact with business people from France. We had the opportunity to book meetings with them in advance. We had opportunities to share our profiles and learn more about how they do things, but also go towards a point where we can actually do business together with them. Not just in France, but also in other parts of Africa where doing business with French colleagues would make a massive difference. So all our opportunity was there on the table. It just came down to saying, great, are we able to prepare in advance, go there, learn how to communicate emotionally, through word, through exchange of culture, but build from that, you know, our needs to make a difference through business and otherwise. And I think there's so much of that which was there. Not only do I think, I'm pretty sure, but I know it takes time. In my own interactions with businesses in France, which started way earlier than this, I would say it's the same as my interaction with businesses in other countries as well. It takes time to build something, but you've got to have patience, confidence, and a willingness to learn and continuously improve and build. And that's the same thing that can happen there. But the difference today is this. With the ecosystem that this summit has given us, when my colleagues and I went to France in 2015, we didn't have this ecosystem. We went out there and, you know, we followed, you know, the book, as you may, and got to somewhere. You know, I'd say 7 years on, we've got to somewhere. But the difference now is this. The young people who went there this time around, they've got the ecosystem of the New Africa-France Summit around them. They've got the support structure. They were looked after really well for the entire time they were there, treated as any high-level delegation would have been treated. Beyond that, there's a lot of support from the French ecosystem in each of the countries where they are from, be it, you know, through the embassies or through the Alliance Française, but even going a bit further and looking at the new initiatives which have been deployed alongside this summit. If you go to the New Africa-France Summit web pages online, you'll find initiatives that have been set up specifically for different industries. I know of 2 in particular for the creative industry, and you can go online and check those out. And there are incubators where you can go with your idea, build it up, and get it to a point where it's robust and can last a distance. So if we all know Yves Saint Laurent, French brand, could we get a Ugandan brand in fashion going on to one of these incubators and accelerators and building up, getting to a point where they have strengthened themselves as a brand and as a business, and they're able to access funding as part of that as well. So there are two different things you'll find on the website, which includes support, incubation, funding, and further investment. And it's being led by none other than the French Development Agency, Agence Française de Développement, which is it's the same entity that's supporting infrastructure, roads, and so on. That same entity is now supporting the creative industry. That means so much.
Okay. I want to just ask you one more question, Pete, before we go for a break. I mean, you're obviously breaking this down, and to everyone out there, we're talking to Engineer Peter Nyeko, who was at the New Africa French Summit 2021 on the invitation of the French embassy in Uganda and the French government. And of course, they came back with a different perspective, which we need to dive into to understand the different perspective that will allow us to shape the attitude and perception of the local people going forward. Relationships mean two. Must be in communication. They must be talking. What is your say? What is your comment about the New Africa France relationships? Have a say, send us a comment or kisses or disses, and let us know what your thoughts are. Peter is breaking down what he has seen at the conference, and for the next couple of days, we're definitely going to be discussing the New Africa France relationship. What does it mean for us in the creative industry? I mean, every sector in Uganda or anywhere in the world needs a creative mind. A creative mind is a person who think about something, think about the solution to the problem, creates the product that is needed in the market for us to be able to move forward. It is a solution based. So if we're talking about the New Africa, then we've got to be able to make sure that this is actually something that we're all working together to make sure it works. Peter, coming back to you. The attitude in Africa is different. I mean, if you have been in a relationship where you felt like the relationship in the past wasn't okay, some would say, take for example, if you felt like the relationship in the past was very aggressive or was quite abusive to you or quite demeaning to you, and now, the relationship is changing and it's beginning to look like, no, we're starting from a new fresh page, forget about that. We saw that on the stage when the French president actually apologized. He started this in Ouagadougou sometime, and then again this time around he apologized. And some of the young people took it upon themselves to say, this is the only chance we have to talk to the president of a different country like France. You don't quite get that in the US, in the UK or any other countries that are quite very eminently placed in Africa. It was something different. But then again, there's an argument that maybe because he's young, maybe because the other one don't understand as the young, maybe because the older generation don't understand the younger generation. What does that communicate to us? What was the feeling like in the room when it says, we are sorry for whatever has happened in the past, for whatever our ancestors have done, for whatever our background has done, for whatever our relationship has been, we are sorry. How did the people who are seated in that place, the young black Africans, look at it, particularly from the point of witness as Peter?
Awesome. So what's interesting is we shouldn't think of history as 50 years or as 500 years.
Yeah.
Let's think of history as history. And if we look back only 50 years, we can see it from only one angle. If we look back 500 years, we can see from a different angle.
Yeah.
If we look back 5,000 years, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Remember the time when you may have been a pharaoh?
Yeah.
Right here where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
When the superpower was the country,
yes,
the civilization around these waters called the Nile.
Yeah.
Imagine if there was a new France Africa Summit then,
Yes, yes, yes.
hosted by the Pharaoh.
Yes, yes, yes.
What was the relationship then?
Yeah,
There are cycles in history.
of course.
And we can't, I mean, this is my opinion, but I believe we can't focus only on one part of history
Yeah,
and forget that there has been cycles for quite a while.
yeah.
I went all the way back to ancient Egypt, but we can go even closer to the Roman Empire. And we can think of the Africans within the Roman legion
Yes.
who were part of the conquest of France and other places. We could think of the Africans who were part of the conquest of most of Europe during the time when, you know, we had the Moors
Yeah.
and the Saracens, you know, in Spain and in Italy, who were just kind of near France as well.
Yeah.
History is really interesting. And we've got to think of it and say, great, ultimately, you know, whatever happened 50, 500 or 5,000 years ago, let's look at it holistically and let's look at